All right, moving on to story number 2. Twitter just took unprecedented action this past week by actually fact-checking one of President Trump's tweets. Okay, now, to provide a little backstory to this, there has been a move by some states, particularly California, to expand mail-order ballots. Okay, and there's a difference now between mail-order ballots and absentee ballots. An absentee ballot is when you go to, usually, it's the county courthouse or something like that, and you request an absentee ballot for your district and you have to give a reason. You say, I'm going to be out of town on business. When I was actually going to graduate school in Virginia, I had to say, hey, look, I'm going to be in classes in graduate school in Virginia. I'm not going to be there. Or you have a physical disability or an illness or something. But you have to go, or someone has to go, and you have to contact someone, and you have to give a specific reason why you need an absentee ballot. With mail order ballots, there's none of that, okay? The voting district just mails off ballots to everyone who supposedly lives in the district, no questions asked. And Trump has very much opposed this, okay? This is actually what he said on Twitter. Quote, "There is no way, zero, that mail-in ballots will be anything less than substantially fraudulent. Mailboxes will be robbed, ballots will be forged, and even illegally printed out and fraudulently signed. The governor of California is sending ballots to millions of people. Anyone living in the state, no matter who they are or how they got there, will get one. That will be followed up with professionals telling all of these people, many of whom have never even thought of voting before, how and for whom to vote. This will be a rigged election. No way." Now, underneath that second tweet, okay, because there were 2 tweets, Twitter put up a fact check on the second tweet that Trump sent out. And this is what the fact check said. Okay, this is Twitter. Well, actually, if you clicked on that fact check, then Twitter took you to Twitter's own pages. And that page said this, quote, "On Tuesday, President Trump made a series of claims about potential voter fraud after California Governor Gavin Newsom announced an effort to expand mail-in voting in California during the COVID-19 pandemic. These claims are unsubstantiated, according to CNN, Washington Post, and others. Experts say mail-in ballots are very rarely linked to voter fraud," unquote. There are basically 2 parts to this story. Okay, the first has to do with, are mail-in ballots, are they a problem? Can they potentially be open to being rigged, to being exploited, to being corrupted? And the answer is yes. Hell yes. Of course they can. Okay, voter huskers, okay, people who try to sway elections, they use absentee and mail order ballots to their own advantage. Okay, for example, okay, these are just a few examples that I pulled. Okay, for example, did you know that per the Heritage Foundation in 2016, the 2016 presidential election, quote, "More mail ballots were misdirected and unaccounted for than the margin of votes between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. She had 2.9 million more votes, yet 6.5 million ballots were misdirected or unaccounted for by the states. In other words, for every vote that Hillary won over the eventual president nationally, more than twice as many mail ballots disappeared or went to the wrong addresses." Okay, think about that. More votes went missing or were sent to the wrong people than the difference in the popular vote between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. 6.5 million ballots? Just think about that. That might still seem a small amount when you consider that there are 332 million Americans, roughly, at this time. But then you have to think that only that not everyone votes. I mean, some, people are children, they're minors, and they can't vote, but other people, they just don't vote. More people vote for presidential elections than for midterm elections, but still, okay, a majority of the country does not vote. So all of a sudden, that $6.5 million, that 6.5 million votes, all of a sudden, that becomes a much bigger deal. A much, much bigger deal. So that's the first example, okay? Here's another example that I pulled from the Daily Signal. In 2017, Eatonville, Florida Mayor Anthony Grant was convicted of a felony charge of voting fraud and misdemeanor absentee voting violations. Prosecutors said that as a candidate in 2015, Grant coerced absentee voters to cast ballots for him. In at least one case, prosecutors said, Grant personally solicited an absentee vote from a non-resident. Basically, what Anthony Grant was doing is he was going around forcing people to vote for him. He went around to people who had had absentee votes sent to them, and he coerced them, metaphorically twisted their arm to vote for him. Okay? In another example, in 2018, this is a big one, gang. Okay, pay attention to this one. In 2018, the State Election Board of North Carolina overturned the results of the 9th District race because of illegal voter harvesting that included forging and altering mail order ballots. An entire congressional election was thrown out, declared invalid, because of the corruption that had happened with mail order ballots. And in fact, in 2007, get this, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement said that absentee ballots were the weapon of choice for vote frauders. Okay? That's how vote frauders, people who try to cheat in elections, that is their weapon of choice. And it just makes sense. It makes sense, no matter how you look at it. Because when you send ballots through the mail, instead of having people go to a polling area, okay, or to a polling place, all of a sudden you have added so many extra steps. Because now the ballots, they have to be mailed to everyone. So that means that you have to have enough ballots. You have to know how many people are in the district. You have to know that they are still there. You have to know that they haven't died. Then you have to trust the post office with delivering those ballots. Then, what you have to do is you have to trust people, saying that, you have to trust people. You have to trust, first of all, the post office in when people mail those ballots back, and then you have to trust people, because all of a sudden everything becomes open. Instead of a secret ballot, if everyone's getting a ballot at home, all of a sudden everyone knows, oh, Granny's got her ballot. I wonder if I can convince her to vote for this candidate over this candidate. You have to trust people, because some people might say, oh, I'm sorry, I lost my ballot. You mailed it to me, I lost my ballot, so I have to come to the polling place to cast my vote instead. And when really, of course, they haven't. They haven't lost their ballot. They mailed in their ballot that was sent to them by the mail, and now they're voting again. But since you don't have to sign anything, right, because it's still a secret ballot, then, it just opens it up to so much potential corruption. The post office has to be trusted to actually deliver, not lose anything. People who are trusted with gathering the ballots have to be trusted not to hide anything. And again, pressure on family members and on friends to vote for one candidate over another after they know that that ballot is in their hands. And let me just ask everyone here a question. Do you not think that there is going to be so much temptation to cheat in this election. I'm not trying to cast doubt or cast shade on the process or anything like that, but think about this. And this goes true for both sides, okay? We are living through a crisis. We are not at the verge of a crisis. We're not at a turning point, etc., etc. We are living through a crisis. If you listened to my first video, you know that I talked about Minneapolis, okay? A entire city, a major city in the United States, burning like a third world country. We had rioters actually take over and burn down a police precinct, and nothing was done about it. We have the pandemic. We have 40 million people now out of work. Okay, we've got the sudden realization that we are in another Cold War with China. We have everything is collapsing around our ears, and everyone is pinning their hopes. Politically, they are pinning their hopes on this election. That raises the stakes. And when you think that your only hope to sink or swim depends on who gets elected in November, all of a sudden a whole lot of things become justifiable, okay? And we've seen this. I've talked before about how people have been saying, I believe Tara Reade. I believe her allegations when she says that Joe Biden pushed her up against the wall in 1993 when she was a Senate aide for him and he put his fingers into her. I believe Tara Reade, but I'm still voting for Joe Biden because Trump is a bad man. Or we just had someone in the Washington Post, I believe, seriously right, that Joe Biden could roast babies alive and eat them, and she would still vote for him because, damn it, this election is just that important. We have to get Trump out of office no matter what. Now, take that mentality and apply it to a process that allows the vote to be much more easily corrupted, much more easily twisted to fit your ideas. And do you really think that no one is going to actually give into that temptation? I don't know about you, but I don't trust human nature that much. I'm very much suspicious, especially in this, just absolute cutthroat partisan environment that we live in today. On the best of days, in the best of years, I wouldn't trust it. And especially now, in the environment that we live in now, I don't trust it. So that's the first issue. None of which, by the way, were actually mentioned. None of these reasons that I have just given, none of these examples that I just gave were actually mentioned in Twitter's fact check. And that actually leads us to the second element. Okay? Jonah Goldberg said on Twitter, I'm saying that a lot this episode, but Jonah Goldberg, previously from National Review, he's left it now and he started his own website, his own commentary called The Dispatch. He said on Twitter that the people calling this censorship aren't correct because, it's a very weird sort of censorship that actually gives you more information. He was talking about, of course, Twitter posting a link to Trump's tweet where they said, experts, CNN, the Washington Post, experts say that there's very little chance that mail-in ballots are actually corrupted, that they are rigged or anything like that. So Trump, once again, he's getting people riled up, he's lying, he's talking through his hat, etc., etc. And Goldberg is correct as far as that goes. It's not censorship, but that still doesn't make it kosher because it's still Twitter controlling the narrative. It is still Twitter controlling the storyline. As I just said, they didn't make any mention of the 2018 9th District race in North Carolina. They didn't make any mention about the 2017 conviction of Anthony Grant. They didn't mention anything about the 6.5 million ballots that went missing in the 2016 presidential election. Didn't make any mention of what the Florida Department of Law said in 2007. Didn't mention any of those things. And then remember who Twitter referred to in its fact check. Okay? Let me read that to you again. Trump's claims, it said, are unsubstantiated according to CNN, Washington Post, and others. CNN and the Washington Post. Is there anyone who has been, semi-paying attention for the last 10 years who honestly believes that CNN and the Washington Post are objective news outlets that try mightily, that strive their best to actually curb the biases of their employees and their own group biases? Does anybody honestly believe that? No. No. We know that CNN and the Washington Post and the other mainstream news media outlets are biased. We've seen it time and time and time again with the defense and the iteration and the repetition of hoaxes like the Very Fine People hoax and the Russian hoax and the Ukrainian hoax, etc., etc., etc. Even when there was proof positive that Trump had not done or had not said the things that they claimed that he said or did, they continued to push the hoax. We've seen it now. Washington Post, the New York Times, they are all, none of them are saying that Michael Flynn, even after evidence has come out that he did not lie to the FBI, that he did not willingly lie to the FBI, even after that evidence has come out, they are still pushing this idea that he is guilty because, he lied to the FBI. He admitted that he lied to the FBI. The fact that we now have evidence that the FBI set a perjury trap for him means nothing to them. They never, ever, ever mention it. Their opinion writers, their stories, they never, ever mention it. Or if they do, it's 8, 9, 10 paragraphs down, by which time they know that very few people are actually going to read it. Because most people, if you're anything like me, you read the headline, maybe the couple of paragraphs, you skim the next couple of middle paragraphs, and before you get to the end, it's like, yeah, I've got this story. Move on to the next one. See what else is going on in the news. So, who are the sources that Twitter is going to be using to fact check? That is a major question. And Twitter has already answered what it's going to do, which sources it's going to use. So that is a huge old red flag. And then here comes something else. Is Twitter actually going to do this equally? Are they going to take figures on the left? Are they going to fact check them? Are they going to flag them? Right, that's a big question. Sohrab Omari had a great piece in the New York Post this morning where he said, he listed a couple of prominent officials and personalities on the left and said, is Twitter going to fact check them? Are we going to do that? Or are we just going to, ignore our eyes? Are we just going to focus on these people over here and not care about these people over here? This is actually a huge thing because this is going to start a war for control for the internet. We're really between the devil and the deep. We really, really are. Because on the one hand, we cannot allow social media companies to just continue like they have, because we have been shown time and time and time and time again that they are biased, that they don't care, okay, about being biased, and that they proclaim to the heavens when they're asked or when they're grilled on Capitol Hill that, oh, we're platforms. And they continue to act like publishers. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, however, the idea of the government exerting this sort of big brother oversight of the whole thing is not too appealing either. Because, of course, the question then becomes, who is in charge of the government? We saw during President Obama's second term of office that the IRS was weaponized against these, these Tea Party-like organizations. The IRS was weaponized. Mark Stein pointed out, I still remember, he pointed out so beautifully at the time, that the United States is the only country in the world where people are afraid of the tax revenue service because they know that the IRS can make your life a living hell if they so choose. And we saw what happens when that department becomes weaponized. So that leads to a whole huge question. Well, who is in charge of the government? Okay, does that mean that the government is going to actually be protecting my freedom of speech online? Or does that mean that it's going to allow social media to do whatever it wants because I'm on the wrong side of this new administration? These are all questions that we have to ask. And you guys know me. If you watched my video back in December, I made the case where the censorship of some sort or another, that's just part and parcel of the whole game of social media. Because social media represents unthinkable amount of power in the ability to control and to manipulate and to channel communication, which in and of itself is a huge power. So I don't know, honestly, how this is going to happen, how this is going to turn out. But like so many other things, we really kind of have our backs up against the wall and we don't have a lot of good options. But be that as it may, that is story number 2.